Mr. Agnew, please.
Thank you very much, and I think you've produced a very useful document here telling us how other countries go about supporting agriculture. I was interested in the Australian scheme. I mean, my colleagues in here will know that the Australian farmers will not change the weather, but if they're being encouraged to reduce fuel, then that's obviously quite useful. But I found it a bit difficult, just looking at the couple of lines you had up there, as to see exactly what Australian farmers are expected to do in order to get the support. And it looks to me as though it might be a dressed-up set-aside, in effect that they will reduce production in order to get the money. And perhaps you could just confirm that. One of my colleagues down there, I think from Romania, talked about water. And it is in very short supply. And there are ways that farmers could use less water or rely on what there is, and that is to adopt new plant breeding techniques. So we have some drought resistance. But unfortunately, the Green Lobby in the European Union is so strong, they've not only banned GM crops, they've managed to ban gene-edited crops as well. This would be the resource to enable farmers to use less water. And until this is confronted properly, I think money thrown at farming is misdirected. It wouldn't be a bad idea just to rehearse really why we protect farm incomes and our own farming. If you look at the position of the UK, Brazil could probably feed the UK. They could grow 2 crops a year, keep felling the rainforest, pay people very little money, use all sorts of methods we aren't allowed to use, and our consumers in the United Kingdom would get cheaper food. But, of course, there's a flip side to that. The weather in Brazil may go wrong, and they will look after their own people before the experts. And, of course, food can be used as a weapon. Suddenly, Brazil discovers that they can turn the food tap on and off and tell us what to do politically. And, of course, there's the whole thing of terrorism. These boats have to dock somewhere, and they are very vulnerable to somebody blowing them up. So that means all countries do need a level of food security, and I want that word mentioned in here today. We do need that. Every government has this trade-off. It's got to have reliable food supply to the people who live there, which means possibly protecting its own agriculture, but it's got to make sure that food is reasonably priced. Chairman, I will be slipping out of the meeting for a short time, but I'll be coming back to hear the answers, I hope. Thank you.
One aspect that I wanted to add, I forgot to answer, was the question about the auctions in Australia for carbon sequestration payments, activities. And there was a question of what are farmers paid for. I mean, as I said, this is not part of the agricultural policy, it's climate policy, and any activity that sequests carbon is paid for. So, for example, this can be changing land management or planting trees or removing stock. So it could be any kind of activity that sequests, that has the potential to sequester carbon. And it's not related to maintain farming as such. But of course, I mean, Australian farming structures are quite different. So it's large-scale, extensive, very dry areas. So even if you do let's say, planting of trees, that doesn't mean that you give up farming as such. So maybe that was helpful to answer the question about what are farmers paid for. And the question of who is paid, is it the landowners and the farmers? I think it's very different in the different types of instruments, and we cannot judge it as such, as we should only pay farmers. Depends really on the type of instrument.